Hey guys, welcome to episode 4 of the massive masterclass. Today we'll be looking at the rest of the front interface. That's from Modulation Osc all the way down to macro control. These tabs are going to be saved for the following episode. And for the finale, I want to show you some tips and tricks. And I want to answer some questions that you might have. And the easiest way for you to ask me a question is to do it on Twitter. My Twitter handle will be on the screen and in the description below. If you don't have Twitter, you can leave a comment on this video asking your question, but I'm not guaranteed to see it. When you send me a tweet, it sends a notification directly to my phone, so I'll see it 100%. Also, if you could follow me on Twitter and SoundCloud, that would be great. All links are in the description below. Okay, let's get started. So first up, we have Modulation Osc, which is this box over here. This oscillator uses sine wave modulation, and it's important to keep this in mind when using one of the various modes over here. So if we go through everything in the box, we have pitch here, which is obviously to change the pitch up and down. This knob here is to change the amount setting. So the amount that it's changing depends on what mode you have set down here. Then we have the modes, which is the various types of modulation. And we have oscillator over here, which changes what oscillator is in effect. So if you have 1 selected, that's going to apply ring modulation to oscillator 1. And that applies for all of these ones from ring modulation, phase, and position. Filter FM, however, the 1 and 2 box here is talking about the filters. So if you have 2 selected, that means you're applying filter FM to the second filter. So we should run through all the various modes inside the Modulation Osc. So ring mod is ring modulation, and that's going to combine 2 audio signals in a way that their frequencies become interrelated. This is going to create new frequency components in the signal. Now, if you don't understand at first what that means, it's okay, because all we're worried about is how it sounds and how it's going to affect the sound. And what it's going to do is it's going to add a metallic kind of quality to the sound. So if we select oscillator 1 and set it to square, we're going to apply ring modulation to oscillator 1. You'll see over here that that's a square sound. And you'll see the wavetable shape here. So right now it's a square. And as I apply ring modulation, you'll see how it's going to change. So that's ring modulation. Phase modulation is sonically the same as FM synthesis, with the Modulation Osc being the modulator. So if we apply phase modulation to oscillator 1, you'll notice though that I said it was like FM synthesis, with the modulation oscillator being the modulator. Now in FM synthesis you would pick 2 different types of wavetable shapes. And if you remember in the beginning, I said that the Modulation Osc uses sine wave modulation. So it's basically using a sine wave into a square. So and that sounds like this. So that kind of thing is great to use on bass sounds and that kind of thing. And then position mod is more effective when the main oscillator's wavetable differs from a sine wave, so it's not going to have a huge effect on something like a square. But if we were to add a polysaw with some pitch, you'll notice then that it'll have more of an effect. Right, so basically it's going to give the signal a rougher tone. So next up we have filter FM, which stands for filter frequency modulation, and this allows you to modulate one of the filters. It's best in this case to just listen to what effect this will have on your sound. Just note that all filter types can be modulated by the Modulation Osc, but we should probably use something like a low pass just for this demonstration. So if I play a note right now, it sounds like this. Right, so we'll push this all the way to FM1, so now we can't hear anything. Okay, we'll set that to filter 1 because we're going to use filter 1. And we'll set some resonance, give the sound some characteristic. and that actually behaves well with all the various types of filter types. Okay, so that's Modulation Osc done. Next we'll move on to noise. Okay, so noise. So over here we've got the various noise sounds, right? So you can pick any one of those. We've got a color knob and an amp knob. What your color is going to do, it's going to shift your frequency up and down, and your amp is obviously the volume. Okay, so I'll show you how this works with white. So if you look up here, you're going to be able to see the frequencies. So as you turn the color up, it shifts the frequencies over to the right hand side, and as you turn it down, it shifts the frequencies over to the left hand side. And then it also has a routing fader, which allows you to control how much of the signal goes to filter 1 or filter 2. Feedback. Feedback is when you reroute the signal from various points back to the filter input. You can choose where the signal gets rerouted from the routing tab over here. We're going to get more into detail about the routing tab in another video, but basically you just look for these FB points and you can set them yourself. And so inside the box we've got the amp knob, which is going to adjust the level of output, and then we've got the filter fader here, which all the way to the top is going to send all of the signal through filter 1, and downwards it's going to send it all through filter 2. Now with something like feedback, there's a million different ways that you can change and affect your sound, and I could show you that all day, but it's best to just play with it yourself and figure out like how you like it to sound the best, and also you'll just sort of understand how it works after a while. But if we just basically select over here, we've got our square wave. We'll turn the noise off. Basically you're going to get all sorts of sounds like that. Okay, next up are these insert effects. Now there's two insert effects, insert 1 and insert 2, but they've got the same they have the same effects, so we'll just go through one and the same will apply then for the other one. So this little pop-up menu is going to allow you to choose the effect. As you select a type of effect, these boxes will change. So dry wet just controls how much of the signal is affected. The first knob is always going to be dry and wet, except when you choose high pass and low pass filter from the pop-up menu. It'll then change to HP and LP. And the second knob is always dependent on what effect you have chosen. Okay, so we should probably go through the different insert effects. Okay, so the first one is called simple delay, and what this does is it takes the signal and delays it for a certain time before it's passed over into the next module. Okay, so this isn't really like your standard delay where it's going to keep going for how long you set the feedback, because there is no feedback. So basically all it's going to do is it's going to do it once. It's going to delay once, but not in the same way. So let me explain better. If I've got my square selected, right, and if I hold it down, you hear that the delay effect isn't being applied. Let's turn up the dry and wet and the time, and you'll hear it in action. So basically, you can hear it delay once. However, it's not. I'll set this to 50%, so it's equal. So this isn't really traditional, and you have to hold the note down. So if I just tap the note, it's not going to apply the delay effect. So as I hit the note once, it doesn't delay. You have to hold the note down till past the time that you have set here to hear the effect. Okay, and then so you've got your dry and wet, which controls the processed signal versus the unprocessed signal, and then your time just selects how long you want it to take before it delays. Right, next up we have sample and hold. So what this is going to do is sample it's going to sample the incoming audio signal at a given time interval, and the sample is held until the next sample is taken. So basically it just sounds like the signal is being stepped and quantized. So let's set that to 50% and we'll leave the pitch in 0 and we'll turn it up and you'll hear the effect. Right, so that's basically the effect that has. So your dry wet is again going to control the unprocessed versus processed signal, and your pitch is going to adjust the time interval which the frequency is sampled. Okay, so over to the left it's going to be slower, and to the right it's going to be quicker, and it's basically just used to make distortion sounds. Okay, next up we have Bit Crusher. So how Bit Crusher works is it creates distortion by reducing the bit depth of the signal. So again, your dry wet is going to be your unprocessed versus processed sound, and your crush is going to be the amount of bit depth reduction. So if we keep this over to the left, you'll hear it will have no effect. And as we turn up crush, you'll see that it's almost like the signal quality is reduced, which creates a distortion sound. Next up, we have the frequency shifter, which is just going to shift the frequency of the incoming signal. The pitch knob is going to affect the amount of frequency shift. So as we go to the left, that's going to move the frequency down, and to the right, it's going to move the frequency up. Okie dokie. So next up, we've got HP and LP filter, which is basically just your high pass and low pass filter, and these knobs behave like cutoffs, right? So if we set it like that, it has no effect on the sound. So that's going to apply a low pass effect, and that will apply a high pass effect. Next is Sound Shaper, which is going to route your signal through a wave shaper. Okay. And so your drive now is it's basically like a distortion type effect. It's called a sound shaper. So the wave shape is affected by the amplitude of a sound wave. So let's hear this in action. Next up is Parabolic Shaper, which is the same thing, but instead of using the sound, it's going to use a type of parabola. So your dry wet is also, again, unprocessed versus processed, and your drive is going to be the amount of distortion. Can't really hear it that well in this. Let's just listen to the sound shaper one more time. And Parabolic Shaper. Right. Next up, we have the hard clipper, which was introduced in a newer version of Massive, and basically it just cuts off the signal above a threshold, and that threshold is set by this drive. So if we listen to that in effect, you can see how it's behaving in the frequency view up here. Okay, so that's the insert effects done. So lastly, we've got this macro control area here. Now most of you will have used this and understand what it does, but I'm going to go through it anyway, just for the people who haven't used it before. So over here we've got these 4 yellow boxes here. The first one says KTR. That stands for key tracking. So the amount here is dependent on the pitch of the note that you play. So the best thing to do is use a filter for this. Okay, so we'll put this onto the cutoff here, and we'll set it like this, right? Actually, let's just use the whole thing. Okay, so now you can't see my keyboard, but I'm playing a really low note on it, and you can see the frequency. It's right over here. Now I'm going to play a high note on the keyboard, and you'll see that next to no cutoff is applied on this low pass filter. If I play a note in the middle, you'll see about halfway. So now if I move up the keyboard, so as I go up the keyboard, basically it's moving from here all the way to the right. So this doesn't have to just be on a MIDI keyboard as well. It's also inside your piano roll or that type of thing. So basically just the lower notes have more filter applied to them, and the high notes have less. So obviously you probably wouldn't use it in like as extreme as this. You would have a slight variation like that. So that's KTR. Next up we have velocity, which is basically the same thing as key tracking, but it's going to be on how hard you press the keyboard. So right now I'm going to press it lightly, and if I press it hard, then you'll notice that no filter is applied. So softly again, and hard. Cool, so that's velocity. Next we have is TVR here, which is the TR stands for trigger and the R stands for random. So basically it's just going to trigger a random amount each time a note is pressed. So as I'm pressing the note, it's just picking in between the parameter that you've set here. Okay. Then AT, which is aftertouch, and my MIDI keyboard doesn't send aftertouch info, so I can't really demonstrate this. But just to finish up on these, so you can obviously select. So for key tracking, your lowest point is set by this line, and then your highest point is set as you drag up and down. So you don't have to have extreme settings all the time. You can have it very subtle. So that's something to keep in mind as well. It doesn't always have to be such extreme settings. Okay, and then over here we've got macro controls, which allow you to control various things using these knobs. Okay, so what you can do is you can apply multiple things to the same or you can apply the same macro to multiple controls, and then as this is down on the left, all of your knobs that are affected by it will also be on the left, and as you move it up to the right, they will move up as well. So let's just quickly hear how this sounds. Okay, so this is handy for controlling multiple knobs at once. It's what you can do is, which is quite interesting, is if you've got a MIDI keyboard, set your modulation wheel to control this, and then you can control it with your modulation wheel. So you can control various points. If you wanted to see what it sounds like at 50%, you can just move your modulation wheel. But it also can be used for fine-tuning your knob. So if you think about it, you've got this whole knob here, and so you can choose this little section here. Let's unclip it from that. So you can, this little section that I've got set here, you can now use this whole area to control that little section. So it can also be used to fine-tune various things. And what you can do is you can name the macro control. So if you click underneath, you can type something in here. For demonstration's sake, we'll call this cutoff. And so once you have something named, if you go into browser, okay, once you've saved the preset, you'll see that here it says cutoff above. So as you're browsing through your presets, you can control the various macro settings from the browser window, so you don't have to click over to the synth section. Okay, so that's it, all the way from modulation to macro control. Next episode we'll go into detail on these various tabs up here. So we've got one more episode which we're gonna look at these tabs, and then we're basically done for our massive masterclass. There will be one more episode after that on tips and tricks, which we're going to go over things like how powerful these macro controls really are. So I basically just skimmed the surface of them today. So if you have any questions, maybe I didn't explain something properly in one of the previous episodes, or you still don't understand something, hit me up with a tweet on Twitter, and I'll be sure to include your question in the final episode. So thanks for watching, guys. Like this video if it helped you, or if you enjoyed it, or that kind of thing. And I'll see you next time. Cheerio.